I just want to say it's a magnificent piece of work. I followed your web pages for a long time, and I always was waiting for the next episode. And the book is really very, it's wonderful. And my question is, after I finished the book, I thought, you've opened a door that most of us in our generation didn't even know was there. And like you said, there's so many different ways to go. I had a question about, you sort of touch on the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and I came across a couple of websites years and years ago that talked about how they're the invention of the Tavistock Institute. And they actually showed pictures of the Beatles going down the street, and the street is empty. It's like, Saddam Hussein's statue, and supposedly all these people were mobbing it and pulling it down, and then with a wider angle lens, you saw that it was an orchestrated event. And the same pictures with the Beatles at the very beginning to sort of orchestrate this, screaming girls.
Yeah, that was, they were definitely.
They pulled all that stuff. I can't find it anymore. But my question was, you alluded to social engineering, this whole Laurel Canyon scene as a way to sort of siphon off energy from anti-war activities and so forth. Maybe I misread it. But it is a social engineering piece. And there's that other piece of the British rock. And I mean, you can go in all kinds of directions, but the underlying, it made me wonder whether the British invasion and all that stuff was also orchestrated and also very manipulated.
Yeah, I have been getting requests now for several years since I, got like midway into this series. I get requests all the time from people saying, you really need to do the same thing with the British invasion bands. I'm sure that there's an equally fascinating story to be told there. Or you really need to do the same thing with the Seattle scene of the 1990s with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all that, or you really need to do the same thing with the punk and new wave scene and see what was lurking behind that. And I'm very sure that there's an equally fascinating story to be told in each of those cases and others as well. But whether I will ever actually get to that is another question entirely. Like I said, I put like 6-7 years into this thing, as both a web series and then hammering it into a book. And there's only so many hours in the day, unfortunately, and so many years left in my life, and I have a lot of other stuff that I'm interested in looking into. So whether I will continue to pursue the dark side of the music scene is remains to be seen. There is one chapter in the book about the punk and new wave scene. That was one that I got most requests about, because that's the one that really kind of started to replace the Laurel Canyon. As the Laurel Canyon scene started to fade out in the mid to late 70s, it was the punk and new wave, that was taking over the airwaves. And so I did look a little bit into that, but I did not go into any kind of great depth like I did with Laurel Canyon, looking at each individual, band and artist and whatnot, and tracing out their backgrounds. I only went so far as to discover that one family in particular, which was the Copeland family, a very highly placed intelligence family. Miles Axe Copeland Jr. was a very highly placed OSS agent and then CIA asset for many years, and his wife was an equally highly placed British intelligence asset. And their three sons, Stuart, Miles III, and Ian Copeland, between the three of them, just had a huge role in sort of launching and shaping that whole scene. Stuart Copeland was the one that's best known because he was the drummer for the Police. He was the one that was out in the public eye, but the other two were actually much more influential in forming production companies and booking agencies, and they're the ones that signed and booked and recorded and managed a very large portion of the big name punk and new wave acts that came filtering in after Laurel Canyon. So I looked a little bit into that one. But whether I'll ever get to the British invasion, that's the one that most people want to know about now. I get a lot of stuff about the you got to look at the Beatles and EMI and Apple and Tavistock.
Well, just Yoko Ono's background.
Yoko Ono, yeah.
Jeez.
Yes,
So,
I know, yeah.
you know.
There's a lot of weirdness around the Beatles, yeah, but I mean, I don't really know that much more about them than the average fan, to be honest with you.
It's not so much the music, it's just you know, it's like this plan to engineer the perceptions, the mindset, and so forth, of certain generations of kids, you know.
Yep.
Well, it seems that you mentioned how the music scene was guided towards and chose certain artists that actually diverted attention away from peace, love, and rock and roll, and social justice and such and became much more interested in its own ability to have fun.
I believe that the whole hippie flower child movement was at its core detrimental to the anti-war movement because you know basically the hippie ethic was to join a commune, you know, to go off to you know, you can't fix what's out there, so just go off and form your own little paradise and don't worry about what's going on, you know, outside of your own little idyllic community. And that was kind of the hippie ideal. And that's not really, you know, and then coupled with that was the whole, you know, Timothy Leary, you know, turn on, tune in, drop out, you know. I mean, basically what they were being told was, you can't fix this, you can't do anything about it, so just drop out of society and create your own paradise, which is fine for that individual group, but it doesn't really help on a society-wide level to solve the very real social problems that, you know, that were present in the 60s. So yeah, I believe it was, you know, I believe it was manufactured specifically to undermine all the very real social movements that were active, that are now long forgotten, and the whole 60s is just basically remembered as the era of hippies and flower children. And you know, everything was kind of, you know, the women's rights movement, the black empowerment movement, the anti-war movement, the elderly, you know, you had Gray Panthers, you had Black Panthers, you had women's liberation, you had anti-war. You had all the, you know, it was a time when a lot of people were clamoring for real social change in the country, and all of that kind of got subsumed by the whole hippie and flower child thing. And when people look back now, that's what they remember. They remember the hippies, and they remember Haight-Ashbury, and you know, that's really synonymous with all of those movements now, but actually, in large part, it was actually detrimental to most of those movements, if not all of those movements. That's my point of view, anyway. So, anyone else? Yes.
I don't know. I'm very new to the area, so I don't know a whole lot of the history of Royal Canyon.
No problem.
I'm sure you had a lot of preconceptions and things when you first embarked on this whole project. What surprised you most in your research?
A lot of it surprised me, you know. I mean, these were people who were like my idols, you know. I like I said, I was born in 1960, but I always kind of considered myself a hippie that just had the misfortune of being born a decade too late. You know, I mean, in the 70s, you know, we had our color organs and our black lights and our strobe lights and our bell bottoms, and you know, we were trying very hard to still be hippies. And you know, when punk and new wave came out, I wanted nothing to do with it. You know, I was still spinning my classic rock albums and very much, you know, admiring them. And a lot of my other idols have fallen by the wayside over the years. You know, I've been a political researcher now for like 15 years, I think, since I think my first website went up in 1998, I believe, and my first book was published in like 2000. So you know, been digging through this stuff for a while, and you know, along the way, a lot of my political heroes have fallen by the wayside. But I still had these you know, cultural and musical icons from my youth, so it wasn't easy to let go of some of them. Yeah, it was kind of a difficult journey, and you know, it was tough to discover that maybe, you know, some of them weren't what I grew up believing them to be.
Like who?
Who was the political hero
Like
which political hero gave you the most angst?
You know, my heroes initially, my first book was published by Common Courage Press, and I think it was 2000. They published people like Noam Chomsky, Alexander Cockburn, William Bloom, Michael Parenti, Christian Parenti, the old guy with Howard Zinn. They were my heroes once upon a time. You know, very much so, and slowly but surely they pretty much all fell by the wayside over the years, and I don't really have a lot of I don't have a lot of heroes anymore. I don't have a lot of icons. You know, among the current alternative journalists, so to speak, couldn't really tell you anybody that I would personally put my trust in. So I don't really have too many heroes and icons anymore, for better or worse.